Ardell, lovely to meet you today. Thank you for your time. Vested, I really want to talk about Vested and your views on Vested. I mean, I think that at the moment there seems to be a growing desire to see greater collaboration in the market. But are you seeing that? And what are your thoughts on Vested as an opening broad statement to start with?
So my thoughts on Vested, having during the course of last year completed my first Vested deal, and in the process of doing so qualified as a certified deal architect, is that it is the only way to contract. The deal we did, which I might add was 100% virtual. It was done by Zoom. Took us 28 weeks from start to vested agreement. And that was on in excess of $100 million gap deal per year for our organization. The experience of doing that was just fantastic. And I, to be honest, I'm a convert. You know, if anyone asks me about Vested, I'm more than happy to talk to them about it. Straight from the company that we entered into this contract with had spent some time ahead of engaging in the Vested process to determine who was the best partner to progress with. So when I say 24 weeks, it wasn't sort of, you know, woke up one morning and thought we would go out to market and 24 weeks later we've got a partner. It didn't work like that. It spent some time ahead of the Vested process. But from the beginning of the Vested process right through, the openness, the transparency, the ability to speak your mind, captured through the guardrails, captured through the guiding principles, and then captured through the wider team in the way you structured the negotiation was just like, I don't know, all of the things that normally come out and bite you at the end of a transactional based contract. You know, you get to the end and then it's, oh, here are our levels of liability, here's our warranty requirements, and they become real obstacles. They're on the table from the get-go. So you get all of that dirty laundry, so to speak, out of the way. And then you're down to, you know, what's best for both organizations. As you know, it's what's in it for we. And I found the experience uplifting, to be quite honest. And it was, you know, and I do try now, whenever we get deals through our pipeline, to try to twist them to become small v vested. You know, I try to get the buyers to understand the benefits of a joint approach, of a value generating contract, rather than let's drive it to the lowest cost and beat the supplier until they cry type thing, because it just simply isn't the way to do business anymore. And to be quite honest, we've become extremely picky now in JLL, particularly in my region, as to whether or not we bid for work. You know, depending on who's involved in it, what it is, how well the client has teed up the engagement from the get-go, we are more than happy to walk away. And I mean, just last week, I walked away from a 60 million a year gap deal in the same market sector as the one I spoke about that we won last year, because the client's just not ready to engage on the terms that we think they should be engaging on, you know, on relationship, on openness, on transparency. So I think that's answered your first question. I'm not sure.
Well, it does. It's half answer second, because do you think the pandemic has actually changed people's thinking? Has it fast forwarded things a bit?
I think, I mean, it's a good question. And certainly the deal that I referred to, I mean, there was an imperative. I mean, the client had a termination date with their incumbent, so they were working to that. I mean, they could have extended it, but they didn't. And the simple fact that we made it work virtually, I think just goes to show a lot of things, that amazing things can be achieved. And actually, it probably made it easier to do it because people were more accessible. What else are they going to be doing? They're not distracted, and it really helps. So I think the pandemic probably focused our minds to get it done. Did it help? I'm not sure if it helped or not, but it felt like it sort of pushed us along the way more smoothly. There were less distractions for people to get called into.
I was interested you did it over Zoom, because most people say you can't build relationships over Zoom, but I think you can.
I agree. I mean, this was a multi-region global deal. We had long sessions on Zoom with colleagues from America, from Asia Pac, from India, from across Europe. Obviously we were sympathetic to the timing of those, so we didn't see people turning up in the middle of the night and stuff, but it absolutely worked. And it's a different experience, and you have to give time, and you have to read differently the signals you get through this two-dimensional media. But it can work. It did work. We took that contract, we mobilized it in 3 months. We're up and running, not a problem. It was one of the swiftest experiences we've had.
Really interesting. Now, 2 questions. You run EMEA, you're involved in the EMEA. Do you see regional differences in how this may develop regionally? Because it's taken a long time, hasn't it, to get to this point?
Yeah. From an EMEA perspective, what I would say is that continental Europe, and particularly Northern and Nordic Europe, is far more advanced in their thinking towards vested than anyone else. You will know, to get corporates in continental Europe interested in outsourcing is problematic in its own right. Not least of which they have the labour laws to navigate, but not least of which they've built their businesses with in-house people, and they're far less trusting of outsourcing generally. But so to get them to the furthest end of that scale, which is relationship-based outsourcing, is a big step to take. So a lot of Europe, no, but the Nordics, absolutely. And on the deal I referred to, we had Ernst & Young from the Nordics who facilitated the relationship and the program. They basically led the PMO, jointly paid for that, us and the client, as we did the legal representation, which was also from the Nordics. And it sort of frightened me to hear that the guy from Ernst & Young, who was the lead PMO, this was his 6th vested deal. So that sort of meant there were 5 deals we never even got a sniff at. It's happening out there with people of that mindset, but it's not happening across broader Europe at all. Going further afield, my peers and colleagues in America, definitely there is a trend to vested. There was another deal that we were running in parallel with this one out of Europe, in Americas, which was full-blown vested. Asia Pac, yes, they're obviously bolted into some of the deals that are originated here or in America, but I've yet to see an originated vested deal out of Asia Pac. So again, it's probably more a bit like continental Europe, set in its ways of transactional contracting.
But that transactional piece is changing, isn't it? Do you get a sense we are getting more potentially into a more collaborative, open environment?
It does feel like that. But again, often, if especially on first generation, clients that are taking that step tend to sort of engage with a third party to help them lead that. That third party tends to be procurement orientated. And what I see is procurement, maybe surprisingly, maybe not, tend to still be set in a more transactional type approach. Now, why? Probably because they're incentivized to drive, what they see as value, what we see as cost reduction out of the deal. They're probably incentivized to do that. So it is a race to the bottom on the numbers. But like we keep saying, it's the value that an organization such as ours can bring to integrate services across a client's portfolio that they should be looking at more so than can we deliver cleaning at a cost per square foot less than, one of our competitors. It's sort of, if we're in those types of discussions, we're in the wrong discussion generally.
Yeah, I agree. What are your biggest learnings from the project, the Vested project? In terms of what you do differently, I guess.
I think personally, for me, it was that people buy people. And if you can establish that rapport with your counterpart on the client side from the get-go, that's what makes a difference, because it builds trust, it builds confidence, and it just builds something that you don't normally get when you're in a transactional based deal, because the client's always arm's length. It's the procurement lead that drives it, and that isn't the person that ultimately, not the economic buyer, it's the person who signs off the deal that you need to have the relationship with. In the vested deal, you could do that. So for me, it was realizing that the human side of contracting is just so much more important than your ability to deliver on the ground. Of course, that's important, but you're building a 5-year in this case, a 5-year evergreening relationship. You're there for the long term. You're there as a friend. You're there to help them when things get hard, be called upon to do so, and you're prepared to do it. Other deals tend to be sort of, you're in, out, you tell the story. If the story lands, you may get to the next stage. If it doesn't, you're out, and it just feels wrong. So personally for me, it was that just by being you could actually win really sizable work contracts.
That's quite nice.
It is.
Nice to get back to that.
It was human. It was really personable, and I that was one of the major learnings for me. You can't get away from the fact you have to be able to demonstrate you can deliver, that you're competent as an organization, obviously. But that side almost is a given, right? Because they choose you because you can do all of that, and it's now, how do we bring you close to our agenda as a business and what we're trying to achieve, because you've got a major part to play in that. And that was the major learning for me, that sometimes these deals are bigger than the deal that you're actually negotiating and writing.
And do you need a board buy-in to get this done properly?
Absolutely, Chris. I mean, from the get-go on this, we have what we call a commercial review board that all of our deals go through as a sanity check and a making sure we're not signing up to something that's going to upset us in the future. What I made sure of right from the get-go was that I was engaging with that board on every stage of the deal, so that when it came to sign off, it wasn't what's vested, what's this. So it was an educational journey that I had to bring senior members of JLL and global senior members of JLL on, to make them aware of what was vested, why was it better for us, how does it work, how can the contract be delivered so quickly, why isn't it as problematic as some of the other deals of similar size. So I made sure we had a cadence of those meetings and that they were briefed all along the way. And likewise, our client did the same in their organization.
A lot of it is about the communication of behavior, isn't it? It's about, Kate always talks about choosing to trust, which actually is quite a big leap for lots of people, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And it's the hardest thing to do. It's like, well, I've got to take that leap of faith, because you just simply don't know, do you? You just simply don't know. But for me, once you've taken it, I don't think you look back. You really wouldn't look back. It's the sort of like, You know, it's like when you set up your own business, someone once said to me, just stand on the top of the cliff and jump. You know, there will be a soft landing. It's like, well, it's all right for you to say because you're down there already. But it's the same thing. It's a leap of faith, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And what are your hopes for Vested going forward? Because it's taken time, hasn't it, to get to this point?
It has. And of course, we had heard about it and skirted with it in Europe and maybe done one or two deals in America on the vested basis. In fact, JLL was probably one of the earliest proponents of it on the P&G account. You see that through Kate's literature all over the place. But my hopes for it is that it gains traction, and you know, that's why I was keen to speak to you to evangelize over it, because it is, as I said, you know, the right way to do business. And my hopes is that we just get more and more referrals and connections. And in actual fact, we've had two straight off the back of the deal we did last year, where someone has said, you should speak to JLL about how and what this is about. One example is Network Rail. We've had discussions with them about, well, what does it really mean? And is it the right thing we should be thinking about? So I think there are organizations that are thinking about it, but like you say, they have to make that step and bring everyone on the journey. The biggest learning from it was, if you don't bring people on the journey, I think Kate calls it the new sheriff in town. You know, you might have someone on the journey, but if the senior management change and they come in and they go, well, what's this? You know, go back, revert to type. You're back to square one. So it's an educational thing. So my hopes are it will gain traction, speed, and we'll see more and more deals going this way.
Now, cynics, of course, and critics would say, well, we do this already. So why do we need to learn this? Because we work in trust, as you know, I'll say. What are your thoughts on that?
I've heard that. Do they? I mean, they may have that attitude of mind, but the paper that you sign is not written in that way. The paper that you sign is biased towards, you know, you sell me a commodity at a price, and, you know, the more you sell, the more you make, type thing. So it isn't, and you know, trust and ownership through those traditional forms of contract, you know, they may be written in there, but are they actually fulfilled? I don't think they are. This takes that relationship side of things first, and then puts into paper or puts into writing how you're going to operate and how you're going to behave.
Yeah, because that's the interesting piece. And actually putting it in paper is actually remarkably difficult. To get the wording right in a contract is hard, isn't it?
But you know, on vested, that's where you start. You start with the vision. You build your guiding principles. You establish your behaviors that support those guiding principles. You handshake on that, and you agree to say and call out when one or other of the parties is not adhering to those principles and behaviors. I mean, where do you see that in a traditional form of contract?
No, it is difficult. It's different. And in terms of the training, because the other comment that people will fire back is, do we really need to be trained on this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it is. Look, it's a big commitment. For us, it was sort of easy to do because we used the training and the actual contract as it was unfolding together, so we could test what we were doing, having Kate help us do it as we went along. So we sort of did the two in tandem. If you're doing the training in isolation, I mean, I can imagine it's sort of a bit, A, it's long, B, it's time consuming, and C, it's probably a bit dry if you can't apply the principles to the reality of what you're doing. So if you get the opportunity to learn on the job, which we did, and then you qualify your deal as a vested deal and you qualify a number of you as CDAs, then that's the way to go. But even then, you know, some of our people, we brought our legal team in. We tried to bring them in early, but they didn't do the vested training, but they still thought like traditional lawyers. And so did the clients' teams, which is why we brought in an independent lawyer to sit between them that was vested trained to educate them along the way. They didn't do the training, but they they grafted onto the principles of the vested
That's the
arrangement.
funny, because that's the funny thing. You are almost changing your behaviours of 20 years, aren't you? As you go into this.
And it really is hard to do. You have to check yourself. And you talk about trust. It's trust on both sides. Am I really going to see the benefit of what was, but yeah, time will tell.
But the outcome must be a nicer outcome at the end, isn't it? Because you've got strong relationships when you're working in partnership.
Absolutely. And the outcome has upside for both, right? So, as a principle, this deal was, one of our guiding principles was we will make a profit. We didn't say how much, that we just said our guiding principle is this deal has to make a profit. So, it was structured in such a way that, our overheads were covered and there was a small profit return on the core service delivery. Where the upside comes is based on the outcomes of how you behave and deliver other services in that relationship, which are priced differently from the core service because they recognize there's maybe higher skill required or specialist skill required, and therefore it attracts a higher return. And so, you are vested because you have to deliver on the core to get a chance for the outcomes that are surrounding the core. So yeah, but the upside of that is actually substantial if it all works as planned. And the key to it is to work with the client to identify those value accretive opportunities, or turning it the other way, those cost saving opportunities. Because if you do, there's an agreement, a pre-agreement that you both share in the upside of that, but you win together and you lose together, and that's the balance.
I get that. Oh, look, Ardell, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure.
Talking to you.
And you, Chris, thanks for that.